Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 261 to 265. Quran lesson by thinker of Quran, Allama Parwez. My dear friends, today is the 10th of August 1969 and the lesson begins from verse 261 of Surah Al-Baqarah 261. Mention of a divine formula for revitalizing nations. In the previous verse, a profound reality was presented. A revolutionary preacher had asked how nations can be granted new life. What is the method by which the trumpet of Israfil can be blown in the settlement of the dead, bringing forth the resurrection of the present? It was said that these people have become deeply entrenched in their habits. Whatever has been happening, they continue blindly, unconsciously, considering it the path of virtue. These false beliefs and baseless ideologies have penetrated so deeply into their hearts that removing the love of Samiri's calf from them is a most demanding task. Therefore, the voice you raise before them appears strange and unfamiliar. They shy away from it, they resist, they do not come near you. The method required is the same as that used to tame wild birds: patience, endurance, steadfastness, tolerance, love, attraction, and charm. Bring them closer, draw them nearer. It will take a long time, it will be a most trying stage, but without this, they cannot become familiar.
Formation of a group is inevitable for a new world. This is the method of breathing new life into nations. Through it, a group is formed, and it is this group that brings about the revolution which revives the dead of the graveyards with fresh life. For revolution, the formation of an initial group is inevitable. This is not an individual program, it is a collective program. That is why the presence of وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ with Muhammad the Messenger ﷺ is indispensable. This is the group of وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ which is prepared in this manner. The group was formed. Reflect on how trying and exhausting the stage was. As I often say, the prophetic life of Muhammad ﷺ extends until the day of resurrection, for he is the last prophet ﷺ. Every breath of his life outweighs centuries. His prophetic mission lasted 23 years, of which 13 years, more than 50%, were spent in making those wild, unfamiliar birds familiar. If viewed superficially, the outcome of those 13 years seems very modest. In the Battle of Badr, there were only 313 fighters. But once this group came into existence, that in the remaining 10 years they accomplished what could not have been achieved even in 10 centuries.
No economic system can be fruitful without being shaped in the light of revelation. The first stage for the revolutionary preacher required immense steadfastness, commitment, and endurance. But this was not limited to the preacher alone. The next stage began for the group itself. The first essential point is that just as the revolutionary preacher was Muhammad, the Messenger ﷺ, and the group was the companions radiyallahu anhum, in general terms what you may call a vast assembly of spirituality, yet no program, no system, no revolution can succeed unless economics is involved. This is precisely why the very next verse presented to us is مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ 261. Now comes the verse about spending wealth in the way of Allah. A group is being formed, and for this group, the first requirement is that for the fulfillment of this purpose and program, it is absolutely necessary to have wealth. At the beginning of the program, you will see that it demands only effort, and whatever is spent yields no immediate return. One must keep giving, giving. If the stage for the revolutionary preacher was a test of patience, then for the group of followers, this stage was no less demanding. They kept giving without any thought of return, without even imagining whether anything would ever come back to them. This was indeed a stage that required great courage and determination.
Quran presents the example of cultivation for the system of life. This is why, in the very first verse, the example given is the one that the Quran generally presents for this system, the example of cultivation, the example of the farmer. Here, the same example is given for those who spend their wealth in the way of Allah. And now you understand what the way of Allah means, bringing about such a revolution in which humanity continues to advance through its evolutionary stages. This is the way of Allah. Those who keep their wealth open for this great purpose are likened to a seed sown in the field. From each seed 7 ears sprout, and in each ear are 100 grains. Notice that in this single example, what was said to the revolutionary preacher is now being said to his followers. Look at the life of a farmer. He knows from the very first day that whatever he does will ultimately yield a great result. But imagine if this outcome had not yet been seen in practice, only explained theoretically, and he was told that whatever he does will yield 700 times the return, yet practically the result has not yet appeared before him. For this, how firm a conviction is required, and how great is the stage of patience for the farmer.
The farmer's hard labor on unseen results holds a great lesson. This is why the Quran always gives the example of cultivation. It is a remarkable example. Even before sowing the seed, the farmer exerts immense effort in preparing the land. His sweat and blood are poured into it. Day and night he works tirelessly. In today's scorching heat, when sitting under a fan indoors feels suffocating, just look outside at the farmer preparing his field. People often say, "Jat fakir ho jandayega." This stage is extremely arduous. He takes the few grains that are the family's entire savings, even when there is no bread for the children, and carries them away to mix into the soil. For us today, this may not seem surprising, because we know what will result from it. But imagine if one had never seen the outcome before, only been told theoretically that whatever you sow will yield 700 times in return. To believe this without seeing requires firm conviction. After mixing the seeds into the soil, the farmer does not simply rest. Each morning he goes out with his sickle, hoe, oxen, and other farming tools, working the entire day, returning home empty-handed in the evening. Not for one day, not two, not a month, not 2 months, he continues tirelessly. Consider this: if the outcome had not yet been witnessed, how demanding this stage would be. In the same way, when one strives to become righteous in society, after a few days of effort he may say, "No, it is impossible to survive in this environment." Obstacles arise at every step, difficulties confront him constantly, and ultimately he wonders what he is gaining. This is the stage where human footsteps falter at every step.
Descent of angels is conditional upon wholehearted obedience to God's commands. The farmer's steps do not falter. He returns home empty-handed in the evening, yet the next morning he goes out again with the same diligence and toil. This is because he has firm conviction in the promise. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ 41:30. Those who declare our Lord is Allah and then remain steadfast, upon them to send the angels. Indeed, angels do descend, but when? After 13 years of the life in Mecca and nearly 2 years in Medina, 15 years of arduous trials, the angels descended at Badr. Before that, they did not descend. This was the result of قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ, declared on the very first day, and the stage of ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا, which took 15 years to reach. Once the descent of angels began, it continued repeatedly. This intermediate stage is the stage of patience, the sowing of the seed in the soil and the ripening of the crop. This is the example the Quran gives. From a single grain, 700 grains emerge. وَاللَّهُ يُضَاعِفُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ 261. Allah multiplies for whom He wills. Whoever wishes to attain after passing through these stages of patience should see how much Allah grants in return for a single grain. But observe how many trials one must endure to reach this point. See what the drop must endure before becoming a pearl. For a drop to become a pearl, dam hai moj mein hai halqa sadqam nahang. Every wave holds 100 perils. As Ghalib 1797 to 1869 expressed, there are snares at every step. Yet only the one who carries the program to completion receives the reward. If at any stage the farmer loses courage, saying, "To hell with this program, 4 months have passed, going out each morning, returning each evening with nothing. Better to be a laborer who earns 3 rupees daily than to suffer this misery," then at that very point his program collapses. Nothing grows further. Even the sprouting crops are wasted. Jigar khun ho to phir hoti hai nazar beda. Only when the heart bleeds does true vision emerge.
Deep connection between the two verses. My dear friends,
Reflect on how profound the link is between these two verses. For the revolutionary preacher, the task was to tame those unfamiliar wild birds, a stage of immense patience. After that, when the group was formed, its numbers required the patience of a farmer to keep working tirelessly, labor upon labor. During this period of struggle, who knows how many among them departed from this world? Outwardly, it seemed they gained nothing. Yet the Quran says that those who give their lives in the way of God, when they see their blood's price being received by those who come after them, they rejoice. This is because their efforts were never for selfish gain. A great purpose was before them, and for its achievement they sacrificed. If someone dies a natural death during this process, it does not matter. Whatever he contributed remains his share. When the system reaches maturity and success, every breath of each individual will carry weight and value. That is why the Quran declares those who migrate, even if they do not reach the land of migration and die on the way, their reward is with God, for they too contributed to the cause. This program is like a goalkeeper who stands in the goal for an hour. Sometimes the ball never comes his way, yet when the team wins, he receives an equal share. Those who spend their wealth openly for the completion of this program in the way of Allah are like the farmer's crop. A single grain sown in the soil produces 700 grains. Wallahu yuda'ifu liman yasha. Thus Allah multiplies for whom He wills. If that grain had been ground in the mill the same day to bake bread, it would have yielded only its own worth, 1 grain for 1 grain. It could never have doubled. The one who did not wish for more received no more. But the one who desired abundance took it to the field, and there it multiplied. Liman yasha, whoever wishes for more shall receive more.
Divine principles of justice in God's balance. In many places in the Quran, it is stated that those who perform good deeds receive rewards far greater than their actions. One might wonder, why such an increase? The meaning of greater is that when a single grain is sown, it does not yield only 1 grain. Rather, it produces 700 grains. At the same time, the Quran emphasizes that God does not commit injustice. Evil is repaid only to the extent of the evil committed. If someone sows a defective seed, only that single seed is wasted. It does not cause the entire store of wheat in his house to be lost. This is the extraordinary justice of God. In countless places, the Quran declares that the punishment for evil is equal to the evil itself, while the reward for good deeds is multiplied many times over. It is said, Man ja'a bil hasanati falahu khayrun minha, 28:84. Whoever brings forth good deeds will receive a reward better than them, just as a farmer's single grain produces 700 grains. And, وَمَنْ جَاءَ بِالسَّيِّئَةِ فَلَا يُجْزَى الَّذِينَ عَمِلُوا السَّيِّئَاتِ إِلَّا مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ, 28:84. Whoever commits evil will be recompensed only for what they did. As explained, this is repeated in many places, always with the assurance that God does not wrong anyone. If a seed is defective, or if the required effort according to the program is not made, this is what is called evil, failing to act according to the divine plan. Then it is said, أُولَٰئِكَ حَبِطَتْ أَعْمَالُهُمْ. Their deeds are wasted. The effort is wasted, and only that single seed is lost. But if the seed is sound, possessing the potential to grow, and the soil is fertile, and the farmer labors according to the laws of cultivation, then each grain yields 100 grains. Wallahu yuda'ifu liman yasha'u, wallahu wasi'un alim. Allah multiplies for whom He wills, and Allah is all-encompassing, all-knowing. Notice the word wasi'un. How vast are the possibilities that a single grain returns to your home multiplied into 700 grains. Like the external universe, the Quran advances its economic system step by step. These matters do not occur suddenly or haphazardly, as if sometimes they happen and sometimes they do not. The Quran does not say alim here, it says alim, meaning that everything unfolds continuously according to His knowledge. It is not an emotional or impulsive matter, that if He is in the mood, He grants abundantly, and if not, He takes away double. Such questions do not arise. There is no injustice. The expansiveness of His system is based on knowledge. Just as the science of agriculture reveals vast possibilities before us, the Quran presents the same example. After this, another point is made.
When we examine the Quran's economic system, we see that it progresses in an orderly manner, stage by stage, step by step, from the beginning to the end. This entire progression is what constitutes a system. In our society, however, people often mistake charity and alms alone for the system. They take 4 initial verses about charity, present them, and claim, "Look, the Quran emphasizes charity so much." Thus, charity itself is assumed to be the system, whereas in reality, it is only the preliminary stage of a much broader and structured economic order.
In the economic system, Qul al-Af is the final stage in the Quran. Some extremists take the final stage verses, where it is asked, how much should we spend, and the answer is Qul al-Af, 2:19. Say whatever is beyond your needs, all of it. They bring these verses forward prematurely, but they do not fit at the initial stage. At that time, the false system was still in place. Only a few individuals had prepared themselves. The system had not yet been established. If they were commanded at that stage to give away everything in their homes, they would ask, "What will I eat tomorrow?" The only answer left would be, Allah is the provider. But we know how Allah provides. This explanation does not make sense in practice at that stage. It does not fit. People then say, this system cannot work. What is overlooked is that the program and system progress gradually, stage by stage, from the first step to the final step. The Quran was revealed over 23 years. Revelation did not mean that on the very first day the Prophet ﷺ raised his voice and immediately a complete system was established. At first, only he himself was Muslim. Then one by one, 2 by 2, others joined. A group began to form and the system started to take shape. The final stage, where Qul al-Af applies, could not have been implemented on the very first day. It belongs to the culmination of the system, not its beginning. Completing the Quran's teaching and system in 23 years is itself a wisdom. Observe how, in the beginning, emphasis was placed, encouragement was given, and persuasion was made to spend wealth for the needs of others, to give, to spend, to offer charity and alms. These instructions belong to the early period when the system had not yet reached completion. At that stage, life was still individual. Collective life in its organized form had not yet begun. To understand the system, always keep in mind that it was completed over 23 years. Along the way, for every stage and every step, there were specific instructions and commands. If you view matters in this way, the meaning becomes clear. This was the earliest stage. Here, through encouragement and persuasion, individual needs were being met. That is why it was said, "Alladhina yunfikuna amwalahum fi sabilillahi, thumma la yudbikuna ma anfaqu mannan wala adha, lahum ajruhum inda rabbihim, wala khawfun alayhim wala hum yakhzanun." 262. Those who spend their wealth in the way of Allah to fulfill others' needs, and then do not follow it with reminders of their favor or with harm, for them is their reward with their Lord. And that reward will be the eventual formation of a society in which there will be no fear and no grief for anyone. See how even in these initial commands, such a profound truth was conveyed. Charity and alms are among the initial priorities of the Quranic economic system. As I have explained, the concept of charity is an emergency measure. If you treat it as a permanent system of life, nothing could be more degrading to humanity. When you give something to a person as charity, and when people live their lives dependent upon charity, just look at them. Do you see any trace of human dignity? No, they are crushed, deprived of the honor of humanity, unable even to lift their gaze. This becomes their condition. A few scraps of charity result in a meal, but a lifetime of slavery. Charity can never be a system of life. In the early days, it was needed individually, but as a permanent order, it is destructive. Notice how the Quran addresses this. لا يتبعون ما أنفقوا منا ولا أذى. Those who spend should not follow it with reminders of favor or with harm. The word mannan means reminding of favor, but in common usage, it is like saying, we gave him a pound of flour and then placed a ton of burden upon his head. This is what the Quran condemns. Instead, it declares, قول معروف ومغفرة خير من صدقة يتبعها أذى. A kind word and forgiveness are better than charity followed by harm. Giving a man one meal and then enslaving him for life is no virtue.
The reality is that because we lack a system, we do not even know what life within a system means. Our life remains individual, and charity has been so exaggeratedly glorified as a good deed that our minds cannot imagine anything beyond it.
The existence of beggars becomes a source of reward for the wealthy. Individually, a group of beggars continues to exist. When it is said that there should be a system in which no one remains hungry or unclothed, the response often given is, "This is wrong. It is against the intent of the Quran, Islam, God, and the Messenger." The reasoning is that if no one remains hungry or destitute, then to whom will the wealthy give charity, and how will they earn reward? Thus, it is argued that for the wealthy to gain reward, it is necessary that a permanent group of beggars, needy, and impoverished people exist. Similarly, if there were no thieves, then police stations would not exist, and 20 employees who earn their livelihood there would lose their work. By this logic, the existence of criminals is deemed necessary for the system to function. In the same way, the presence of beggars is considered necessary for the wealthy, so they may give charity and alms and thereby earn reward. Reflect on this reasoning. It belongs to the early days when life was still individual and charity was practiced at that level. It was not yet the stage of a complete organized system. The inscription on the forehead of the Islamic State. When this system comes into effect, no individual will eat by taking from another individual. Such a question will not even arise. In that society, what we call today the state will inscribe on its grand entrance in bold letters, "Nahnu narzuqukum wa iyyahum." We are responsible for your sustenance and that of your children. And you know well, whatever comes from the system carries no sense of personal favor. Yet, from the very beginning, the Quran instills this principle in people's minds. Even though the system is not yet established and matters are still individual, if even a trace of the feeling enters your heart that by giving you have placed a favor upon someone's head, then all that you gave becomes void. It is better to say, "No, brother, forgive me." That is far superior, because then at least you save him from humiliation. His hunger is a physical pain, and enduring it is easier than the torment of crushed dignity. The Quran says, "Maghfiratun," forgiveness is better, for it saves him from that greater torment. Revolutionary transformation in social life through mutual fellowship. What a profound point the Quran makes with maghfiratun. Regarding those who give, it says their inner spirit should be La nuridu minkum jaza'an wa la shukura, 76:9. We desire from you neither recompense nor thanks. Imagine the heights to which the Quran elevates the believer's heart, even in the earliest stage. The Quran gradually transforms the heart of the giver. It expands his inner world to the point where he does not even expect gratitude. Why? Not because of a command imposed mechanically, but because the Quran explains rationally, with reason and evidence, why such expectation should not exist. If the situation is one of giving alms or charity, then naturally the thought of gratitude may arise, but the Quran reminds, وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ 70:24-25. In their wealth is a known right for the beggar and the deprived. Thus, the needy are not receiving a favor, they are claiming their rightful share. And when you give someone his right, how can you expect reward or even thanks in return? This is the revolutionary transformation the Quran brings into social life, reshaping fellowship into dignity, justice, and equality. The Quran's teaching creates revolution within hearts. See how the Quran provides reasoning. It transforms hearts in this way. Faith becomes this: the wealth I possess beyond my needs is their right. It is only a trust kept with me. When they require it, they come and take it. In fact, I should thank them. Thank you, you relieved me of the burden of safeguarding this wealth. I was carrying it daily. Now you have come to claim your right. Take it, and how light I feel. From the very beginning, the Quran keeps instilling such changes within hearts. And as I have said, these lessons will recur again and again because repetition strengthens understanding. One verse is often quoted everywhere. Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al-ihsan, 55:60. Is the reward of goodness anything but goodness? This is the revolutionary spirit.
Goodness is not a favor, it is a rightful exchange, and its reward is goodness itself. The Quran thus reshapes the very foundations of human thought and social relations. The Quran's teaching creates inner revolution, not slavery through favor. The Quran declares, La nuridu minkum jaza'an wala shukura, 76:9. We desire from you neither recompense nor thanks. This is the true spirit of giving. Yet people often misuse hal jaza'ul ihsani illa al-ihsanu, 55:60. Is the reward of goodness anything but goodness? To demand lifelong repayment, obedience, or submission from those they helped. Such an interpretation distorts the Quran's message. It turns a noble act into a chain of exploitation, where the recipient is treated as indebted forever, forced to obey, and stripped of dignity. This is not ihsan, it is enslavement. The Quran's teaching is clear. The reward of goodness is the creation of more goodness, beauty, justice, and dignity in society. True ihsan liberates, it does not bind. To expect gratitude or repayment is to nullify the very essence of the act. Thus, the Quran harmonizes both verses. Goodness begets goodness, but it must be free of expectation. The believer's heart is trained to give without seeking thanks, knowing that wealth beyond one's needs is a trust, a right belonging to others. This is the revolutionary transformation. Giving becomes a means of uplifting humanity, not enslaving it. Our biggest mistake is translating the Arabic Quran into Urdu without understanding its root meanings. My dear friends, the meaning we attach to ihsan in Urdu is not the meaning intended in the Quran. In fact, in the Quran, this word never comes in the sense of favor as we commonly use it. The confusion arises because the Quran is in Arabic, while we interpret it through Urdu usage. We impose our own cultural meanings onto Quranic words. When the Quran says, Hal jaza'ul ihsani illa al-ihsanu, 55:60, it does not mean a favor must be repaid with a favor. In Arabic, ihsan means to create beauty, to restore balance, to bring proportion. Life becomes ugly when balance is disturbed, when needs are unmet. To remove that deficiency and restore harmony is ihsan. For example, wabil walidaini ihsana, 283. If we take ihsan to mean favor, then it would imply parents are crushed under the burden of our favors. But the Quran explains in Kama Rabbayani Saghira, 17:24. When you were small and unable to provide for yourself, your parents filled that gap, restored balance in your life. In their old age, when they can no longer meet their own needs, you must fill their gap, restore their balance. That is ihsan. So when the Quran says the reward of ihsan is ihsan, it means when you restore balance and beauty in someone's life, the outcome is more balance and beauty in society. Ihsan itself is its own reward. It is not about enslaving someone under the weight of favors. It is about creating harmony. This is the revolutionary wisdom. Ihsan in the Quran is not favor, it is restoring proportion. And the Quran's teaching is that the only true reward of creating beauty is more beauty. Every human action is itself its reward. We often overlook the Quran's precise words. It says, Jaza'an bima kanu tha'malun. The recompense is nothing but what they themselves used to do. In other words, the act itself carries its own reward. Nothing comes from outside. Think of a hired laborer. He digs or builds without interest in the purpose, and at the end of the day, he is paid wages. The benefit of his work goes to someone else, while his return comes externally in the form of money. But the Quran's principle is different. It says the return of your action lies within the action itself. For example, when you go for a morning walk, do you return home and ask your family for payment? Of course not. The reward was already contained in the action. Your health improved, your body strengthened, your spirit refreshed. That is, jaza'en bima kanu ya'malun. The act itself produces its own outcome. This is a profound truth. Every deed plants its own seed of consequence. Good actions generate harmony, balance, and vitality within life itself. Evil actions generate imbalance, loss, and destruction. The Quran thus teaches that human life is a self-sustaining moral system. What you do is what you become, and your action itself is your reward. The nature of reward from God, a life free of fear and grief. The Quran presents a remarkable vision. It warns against giving and then placing a crushing burden of favor upon the recipient, as if he must live forever under its weight. Instead, it teaches that true giving is free of humiliation. When wealth is given without reminders or harm, the return is not external tokens, but a transformation of life itself. The Quran says, وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Upon them shall be no fear, nor shall they grieve. This does not mean only the givers are free of fear. It means that when such a system is established, both those in need and those who fulfill needs will live in a society where hunger, deprivation, and insecurity are eliminated. The poor will not fear starvation, and the wealthy will not fear the loss of their wealth. This is the nature of divine reward, a collective transformation where life itself becomes free of fear and grief. It is not about individual favors or personal gain, but about building a system in which dignity, security, and balance are guaranteed for all.
The psychological dimension of reward. Satisfaction of the ego. The Quran points to a subtle but powerful human tendency. When people contribute to something like a hospital fund, the building is completed, but the inner feeling of the donors is often not about the hospital itself. It is about their own sense of satisfaction, their ego being gratified. The Quran, with its deep insight into human psychology, warns against this distortion. It says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تُبْتِلُوا صَدَقَاتِكُمْ بِالْمَنِّ وَالْأَذَى. O you who believe, do not nullify your charities with reminders of favor or with harm. This is the same principle mentioned earlier. The word sadaqat comes from sidq, meaning to make something true. Charity is meant to be the confirmation of faith, a living proof of sincerity. But when giving is followed by reminders of favor, humiliation, or when it is done merely for show, كَالَّذِي يُنْفِقُ مَالَهُ رِئَاءَ النَّاسِ, like the one who spends only to be seen by people, then the act loses its essence. The reward is not in the applause of others or in the satisfaction of ego. The true reward lies in the transformation of society and the inner harmony created by sincere giving. Thus, the Quran exposes the psychology of ego satisfaction and redirects it towards genuine sincerity, teaching that the act itself, when pure, carries its own reward. The Quran's command, do not let your deeds be nullified. Here, the Quran takes us deeper. It is not about demanding compensation from one individual, but about doing deeds for display before people. The Quran calls this one of the worst crimes. Why? Because the act outwardly seems beneficial. A hospital is built, funds are raised, needs are met. Yet inwardly, the giver has destroyed the essence of his deed. The Quran says, "La tubtilu sadaqatikum bil-manni wal-adha," 264. Do not nullify your charities with reminders of favor or with harm. It likens such giving to كَالَّذِي يُنْفِقُ مَالَهُ رِئَاءَ النَّاسِ, 264, the one who spends only to be seen by people. This is not generosity, it is ego satisfaction. Think of the psychology. If there is no announcement, no plaque, no ceremony, no crowd, no garlands, no applause, such a person will not give a single coin. Yet when the stage is set, the cameras are on, and the competition of donations begins, he gives thousands. The hospital may rise, but the Quran says, your deed is nullified. Why? Because the true reward of giving lies in sincerity, in confirming faith, sidq, in uplifting humanity without expectation. When the motive is ego, fame, or self-display, the act loses its spiritual weight. The Quran exposes this subtle corruption. The deed outwardly exists, but inwardly it is void. Thus, the Quran teaches that the value of an action is not in its external results alone, but in the purity of intention. A hospital built with ego-driven charity may stand, but in God's sight, the giver's deed has already been erased. How to protect human actions from becoming void. The Quran's warning about deeds being nullified is profound.
Batil kardiya means that the essence of the action is lost, even if its outward form remains. A hospital may be built, a park may be inaugurated, but if the motive behind the act was ego, fame, or emotional display, then spiritually the deed is void. The reason is that such actions are tied to material measures: money, buildings, plaques, ceremonies, applause. These are all external, physical markers. When the giver's satisfaction depends on these, the act is no longer rooted in sincerity, but in self-display. The Quran exposes this psychology. If there were no ceremonies, no tablets, no officials presiding, no crowd to witness, such a person would not give a single coin. That shows the act was never for God or humanity, but for the self. To protect actions from becoming void, the Quran insists on purity of intention. The act must be done as sidq, a confirmation of faith, not for recognition. When giving is done quietly, without reminders of favor, without humiliation, and without expectation of applause, then the act retains its essence. Its reward lies within itself: the transformation of society, the preservation of dignity, and the inner harmony of the giver. Thus, the way to safeguard deeds is to detach them from ego and material display, and root them in sincerity and proportion. Only then do they remain alive in the sight of God, never nullified.
The Quran teaches that life is not merely physical or material. True Iman, faith, is the recognition that within every human being there is something beyond the body, the dhat, the inner personality. The purpose of life is the growth and development of this inner self. The principle is striking. Your physical body grows from what you consume for yourself, but your inner self grows from what you give for the growth of others. This is the Quran's definition of reward: not applause, not fame, not ego satisfaction, but the strengthening of your own personality. When you give sincerely, without reminders of favor or expectation of thanks, the return is immediate. Your self expands, your character deepens, your personality matures. This growth manifests in this world as dignity, harmony, and beauty in collective life. And beyond death, the trained self continues its evolutionary journey into higher stages of existence. Thus, the Quran redirects human motivation away from material display and toward inner development. Outward show builds monuments that crumble with time. Sincere giving builds the human self, which endures and ascends. This is the path to a life free of fear and grief, and to an eternal progression of the soul. This is the essence of Iman. Faith in Allah means believing that He has given values which nurture the human self. Faith in the hereafter means that a self nurtured in this life becomes capable of progressing through the next stages of existence beyond death. This is the true meaning of belief in Allah and the hereafter. The Quran makes it clear: those who spend wealth merely to show off before people, wala yudminu billahi wal yawmil akhiri, 264, they do not truly believe in Allah and the hereafter. Notice how decisively the Quran removes them from the ranks of true believers. Outwardly, they may be counted among Muslims. Their names may be in census registers. They may pray, fast, and perform good deeds. But if the inner motive is riya al-nas, showing off before people, then the Quran declares such a person has no faith in Allah or the hereafter. Faith is not a matter of external rituals alone. It is the inner spirit, the sincerity of heart, the conviction that giving is for the growth of the human self and for the collective good, not for ego or recognition. The Quran thus defines Iman as a living force within the heart, a motive that transforms deeds into genuine growth of personality and prepares the self for its eternal journey. Quranic guidance, preserving the purity of actions. You have touched on a very delicate point. The Quran itself warns that mixing personal thoughts or self-made interpretations into its teaching is a form of shirk, associating something with God's word. That is why it says, وَمَثَلِ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَتَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ, 265. The Quran itself clarifies the purpose of spending. It should be for seeking Allah's pleasure and for the tathbit of the self,
the strengthening, integration, and development of one's personality. This is placed in direct contrast with Ri'a an-Nas 264, spending for show, for ego, for display before people. The Quran does not leave the matter vague. It identifies the true motive of sincere giving as the growth of the human self. In modern terms, this is integration. A developed personality is whole, consistent, and balanced, not fragmented or contradictory. Elsewhere, the Quran describes the opposite state as fujuraha 91:8, disintegration, the scattering of the self. So when it speaks of tathbit, it is pointing to the inner consolidation of the human personality. That is the true reward of giving, not applause, not fame, but the strengthening of the self in harmony with divine values. Thus, the Quran itself provides the safeguard. Do not add your own ideas to its teaching. Do not seek ego satisfaction, but spend for Allah's pleasure and for the integration of your own self. This is the path by which human actions remain pure and never void.
The Quran's interpretation of false ego as shaitan. Here, the Quran makes a very penetrating psychological point. When a person spends wealth not to uplift others or to strengthen their own self, but merely for riya an-nas, showing off before people, the motive is not faith, it is ego. The Quran equates this false ego, this inner arrogance, with shaitan. It says, وَالَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ رِيَاءَ النَّاسِ وَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَلَا بِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. Those who spend their wealth to be seen by people and who do not believe in Allah or the hereafter. Then it adds, وَمَنْ يَكُنِ الشَّيْطَانُ لَهُ قَرِينًا فَسَاءَ قَرِينًا. Whoever has shaitan as his companion, what an evil companion that is. The Quran is not speaking of an external devil whispering from outside. It is pointing to the false ego within, the pindar and nafs, the self-conceit that drives a person to arrogance and show. This inner force of rebellion, when it becomes the companion of one's actions, nullifies sincerity and faith. Thus, the Quran identifies the true enemy not as an external being alone, but as the inner state of false ego that pushes man toward pride, display, and self-satisfaction. Real faith, by contrast, is the integration of the self, tathbit, through sincere giving, while false ego, shaitan, disintegrates the self, fujur. This is why the Quran calls such motives the worst corruption. They destroy both the deed and the personality behind it. The nature of the human self and the principles of its development with the outlines of Salah's importance. Faith in Allah and the hereafter, in reality, means faith in the human self. This self is not a product of matter, nor is it bound by physical laws. It is a divine energy bestowed by God, which grows and develops under the guidance of His values. Death does not destroy it. Rather, it continues its journey into further stages of evolution. This is the essence of Iman bil-Akhirah. If this conviction is absent, then what remains is only the false ego, the rebellious impulses of the self, which the Quran calls shaitan. The Quran makes it clear that outward rituals alone do not constitute true faith. It says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. Destruction is for those who pray, but are heedless of the purpose of their prayer. Who are they? الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ. Those who perform prayer merely to be seen by others. Their salah is reduced to display, a ritual stripped of meaning. True salah is not about physical movements alone. It is about aligning the self with divine values, integrating personality, and nurturing the inner being. When salah is performed with sincerity, it becomes a system of discipline and collective order that channels divine energy into the growth of the human self. The Quran further explains the consequence of heedless prayer. وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. They block the channels of sustenance, which should flow like streams of water, and hoard them for themselves. In other words, their worship is disconnected from social responsibility. Thus, the Quran defines the principles of human development. The body grows by what it consumes, but the self grows by what it gives. Salah, when understood in its true spirit, is the discipline that keeps this balance alive, connecting the individual to God, to society, and to the eternal journey of the self. The Quran defines the purpose of human actions.
The Quran does not leave human deeds without direction, it determines their true purpose. Outwardly, acts like salah or charity may appear as rituals or material benefits, a hospital built, a room furnished, a plaque unveiled. But the Quran insists that the real measure of action is not in these physical outcomes. It says, Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. My prayer, my sacrifices, my life, and my death are all devoted to Allah, the sustainer of all worlds. This means that Salah is a training ground for aligning the entire span of life with divine values. If after prayer one blocks the channels of sustenance, hoards resources, or builds barriers against collective nourishment, then the Quran declares, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Destruction is for those who pray, yet are heedless of its purpose. When deeds are done for riya al-nas, showing off before people, the Quran acknowledges that worldly benefits may still occur. Hospitals are built, halls are furnished, applause is gained. But it calls these dunyawi faida, temporary material gains. They do not nurture the human self, nor prepare it for the next stages of existence. The true purpose of action is the development of the self, the integration of personality, and the progression of life beyond death. Thus, the Quran distinguishes between outward results and inner purpose. Outwardly, deeds may succeed. Inwardly, they may be void. The real reward is not applause or fame, but the growth of the human self in harmony with divine values, ensuring that life continues free of fear and grief and capable of eternal progression.
The Quran's principle, showy deeds have no weight in the hereafter. This is one of the most striking truths of the Quran. It says, من كان يريد الحياة الدنيا وزينتها نوفي إليهم أعمالهم فيها وهم فيها لا يبخسون. Those who desire only the life of this world and its adornments, we grant them the full return of their deeds here, and they will not be deprived of anything. In other words, worldly acts done for display or ego do indeed produce worldly results. Hospitals are built, halls are furnished, applause is gained, fame is secured. The Quran acknowledges that these material outcomes are real and complete. But then it declares, أُولَئِكَ الَّذِينَ لَيْسَ لَهُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ إِلَّا النَّارُ وَحَبِطَ مَا صَنَعُوا فِيهَا وَبَاطِلٌ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. For such people there is nothing in the hereafter except destruction. Their deeds are wasted and their actions are rendered void. This means that in the scale of the eternal life, showy deeds, ego-driven charity, and acts of self-display do not even appear. They are erased because they never nurtured the human self. The Quran's clarity here is breathtaking. It separates material law from spiritual law. Material law ensures that worldly acts produce worldly results. Money builds structures, applause brings status. But spiritual law measures deeds by their sincerity and their role in developing the human personality. If the motive was ego or display, then in the hereafter those deeds vanish, leaving only emptiness. This is why the Quran insists that the purpose of human action must be alignment with divine values, the growth of the self, and preparation for the next stages of existence. Anything else, however dazzling in this world, is nothing but illusion when weighed in the balance of eternity.
The Quran explains that deeds yield results in this world and in the hereafter. Yet the nature of those rewards is fundamentally different. It says, مَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ حَرْثَ الْآخِرَةِ نَزِدْ لَهُ فِي حَرْثِهِ 42:20. Whoever desires the harvest of the hereafter, we increase his harvest, multiplying it abundantly. This is the law of growth. A single seed produces many-fold when the motive is eternal. In contrast, وَمَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ حَرْثَ الدُّنْيَا نُؤْتِهِ مِنْهَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ نَصِيبِهِ 42:20. Whoever desires only the harvest of this world, we grant him from it, but he will have no share in the hereafter. The Quran makes the distinction clear. Worldly motives yield worldly outcomes, but they do not nurture the self for eternal progression. It further says, كُلًّا نَمِدُّ هَؤُلَاءِ وَهَؤُلَاءِ 17:20. Both groups, those seeking worldly gains and those seeking eternal growth, are supported by natural law.
Whoever works according to principles of effort and cause will see results here, regardless of identity. But the difference lies beyond. One's vision was limited to this world, so his reward ends here. The other's vision was eternal, so his reward continues into the next stages of existence. Thus, the Quran separates the two dimensions of reward. Material law ensures worldly outcomes for worldly motives, while spiritual law ensures eternal growth for deeds rooted in sincerity and divine values.
The basic reason for the difference in reward between this world and the hereafter. This is a very important verse. Those who gave included both types, those who gave purely for the purpose which the Quran calls mardatillahi, 265, and those who gave for ri'a an-nasi, 438. In the donation list, both names are written equally, and the same amount of bricks or rooms are built from their money. Both proceed forward, but in the hereafter, one is taken towards hell and the other towards paradise. Now, the one destined for hell says, "O Allah, we were both in the same gathering, the same appeal was made, and we both gave money in the same way. Why is there a difference now?" The Quran answers, وَيَوْمَ يُعْرَضُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا عَلَى النَّارِ. When those who disbelieved are presented at the edge of hell, it will be said, أَذْهَبْتُمْ طَيِّبَاتِكُمْ فِي حَيَاتِكُمُ الدُّنْيَا وَاسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهَا. You took your good things in your worldly life and enjoyed them there. You wanted the reward in this world, and we gave it to you fully without any reduction. But since you sought only worldly recognition and greatness, you have no share left in the hereafter. Therefore, فَالْيَوْمَ تُجْزَوْنَ عَذَابَ الْهُونِ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَسْتَكْبِرُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ. Today, you will be recompensed with humiliating punishment, because you sought arrogance and greatness in the earth without right.
The Quran explains true and false grandeur, distinction between justified and unjustified arrogance. The Quran does not condemn the desire to be great in itself. Grandeur, kibriyat, is the attribute of God, but a reflection of it should also exist in human beings. The difference lies in whether it is bil haq, with truth, or bi ghayr al haq, without truth. The Quran clarifies that unjustified arrogance stems from the false ego, while justified grandeur arises from the development of personality through values and noble character. One who seeks to cultivate inner strength and dignity through righteous conduct possesses istiqar bil haq. His grandeur is genuine, rooted in truth. On the other hand, those who seek recognition, applause, and worldly titles without truth are guilty of istikbar bi ghayr al-haq. The Quran says, "Kuntum tastakbirun," you sought arrogance in the earth without right. Such people desired worldly recognition, and they received it fully in this life. Their names were inscribed on plaques, their titles were announced, and their ego was satisfied. But in the hereafter they have no share, because their deeds were not for the growth of the self. In contrast, those who gave for mardatillah and for watathbitin min anfusihim, the strengthening of their personality, are rewarded eternally. Their grandeur is justified, because it is rooted in truth. The Quran describes such giving as yukridallaha qardan hasanan, lending to Allah a goodly loan, which is repaid in the hereafter with eternal reward. On the other hand, those who spend kalladhi yunfiku malahu ri'a an-nasi wa la yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, merely to be seen by people, without faith in Allah and the hereafter, their deeds are void in the eternal balance. Explanation of the basic characteristics of the community of believers. This is the community that the Quran prepares. Imagine when such a group is formed, what kind of system will be established through their hands, and what results will appear in the world. These are people who never seek compensation for themselves. Their purpose is وَتَثْبِيتًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ, the strengthening of their own selves. The Quran gives a powerful example. فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ صَفْوَانٍ عَلَيْهِ تُرَابٌ فَأَصَابَهُ وَابِلٌ فَتَرَاكَهُ سَلْدًا. One type of cultivation is when the land is deeply plowed, seeds are sown, and the soil is fertile. Another type is when a thin layer of dust settles on a rock and a seed is placed there. Outwardly, both appear to be soil, but when heavy rain falls, the fertile land produces abundant crops,
while the dust on the rock is washed away, leaving only bare stone. Thus, the Quran shows that the community of believers is like fertile soil. Their actions are rooted in sincerity and values, producing growth and results. In contrast, actions done for show are like dust on stone. They vanish when tested, leaving nothing behind. The Quran explains the difference between land and land. It says, "La yakdiruna ala shay'in mimma kasabu." He worked hard, but nothing was gained. Then it adds, "Wallahu la yahdil qawmal kafirin." Those who deny in this way cannot be guided to the path of success. The example is of a rock with a thin layer of soil. When heavy rain falls, it washes away the soil, leaving only bare stone. In contrast, the Quran says, وَمَثَّلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَتَثْبِيتًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. The example of those who spend their wealth seeking Allah's pleasure and for the strengthening of themselves. Their example is بِرَضْوَةٍ أَصَابَهَا وَابِلٌ فَآتَتْ أُكُلَهَا ضِعْفَيْنِ, a fertile elevated land upon which heavy rain falls and it yields double the produce. Elevated land has the advantage that even heavy rain does not drown it. Instead, it produces abundantly. The same rain that washes away soil from the rock produces double harvest on fertile ground. The causes are the same, but the results differ. The Quran adds, فَإِن لَمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلٌّ. Even if heavy rain does not fall, a light drizzle is enough for such land to produce crops. This means that even with fewer resources, results are achieved when the foundation is strong and sincere.
Unshakable action based on unchanging principles. A living example from the September 1965 war and our ingratitude. The Quran had declared, "If among you there are 10, they will overcome 100. The shortage of material resources is compensated by the abundance of faith and conviction. When there is passionate devotion to the mission, when the heart burns with the desire to sacrifice life for the cause, then the lack of numbers and equipment is filled by this inner force. Thanks to Allah, we often had to cite examples from 14 centuries ago to explain this principle. But in September 1965, we saw it with our own eyes. The passionate love for the purpose, the readiness to give life, showed how the shortage of material resources was overcome. Yet, how quickly we forgot. This nation, already guilty of forgetting its benefactor, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, committed an even greater crime. It began to forget September 1965. Nature will never forgive this ingratitude. The secret of this nation's survival lay in that moment when destiny itself showed special favor. If I go into the Pakistan movement and narrate its history, I must say that Allah bestowed His favor upon me that I was present in it with every breath. There were moments that came which we couldn't even explain. How did this happen? It was something extraordinary. Such a vast state was achieved without a single drop of blood being shed. This was a great blessing. But this nation is ungrateful. We forgot him. Quaid-e-Azam. We thought that after his speeches, perhaps the final seal had been placed. Yet, unexpectedly, another priceless moment came, the War of 1965. In that war, the enemy brought all its destructive equipment into the battlefield, and suddenly the scene of Badr appeared before us. Then came a moment, especially for us in Lahore, when we could hear the footsteps of the approaching invaders. The young girls stood here, and from the battlefield, by chance, a relative would call on the telephone. Our ears were fixed on his words moment by moment. He said, "This line of defense we have drawn, if even a single crack or breach appears in it, then the flood will sweep away Lahore entirely."
We thought anxiously about those young girls. There was no escape route, and even if there had been, our hearts did not want to flee. The only thought was, first protect them by ending their lives, and then end our own. No third option seemed visible. My dear ones, if nothing else, at least this nation should have remembered their services. But alas, countless times alas, that afterwards this nation forgot them, and drifted again into fraud, injustice, and lawlessness. Think, if at any time they had fallen into lawlessness, if the desire for spoils of war had overtaken them, and the same situation had arisen as in the battlefield of Uhud, where would we have been, and where would those young girls have been? Let this nation, if nothing else, awaken its honor. Do not forget them. Their blood still calls out loudly for its price. They were those upon whom even a sprinkle of water produced flourishing crops. This is what the Quran says. Even when resources are scarce, the abundance of faith produces full results. Wallahu bima ta'maluna basir. Do not think that what you do will be wasted or lost. Allah watches every deed, and He gives an abundance, filling the hands of those who act sincerely. But the condition is that the action must be for mardatillahi wa tasbitan min anfusihim, for Allah's pleasure and the strengthening of the self, not for bilmanni wal adha, to burden others with favors, nor for di'an nasi, to seek immediate recognition from people. The deed must be forgotten in terms of worldly reward and performed solely for mardatillahi, in harmony with God's law and system. The result, the recompense, comes in whatever form it may. Through alignment with divine law, the self continues to grow. A system is formed collectively, and individually the personality develops. This, the Quran says, is the true way.
Allah the Merciful does not overlook anyone's rightful deeds. True sincerity compensates for lack of resources. My dear ones, the caller to revolution was told, this stage demands great courage. Your voices may sound unfamiliar and wild to them. Tame them like birds. Make them familiar. Draw them closer. Keep giving love, love, love. Keep giving affection. When they come closer, a community is formed. Now the community is ready. Begin the work. The Quran wrote it on its very first page. Mimma razaqnahum yunfikun. 2:3. They spend out of what we have provided them. It is not about having wealth or riches. Whatever you have, whatever has been given to you, keep it open for others. Remember, the Quraysh also spent all they had, bringing forth an army of 1,000. They too did this. What was the difference between the two? The difference was that their arrogance was biqaid al-haq, without truth. They attacked the oppressed. Here, the grandeur was bil-haq, with truth. Here it was for the growth of the self, for the fulfillment of the divine program, lead up bila alamin, 6162. And this is what the Quran calls the universal revolution. Yawma yakumun nas lead up bila alamin, 836. The day when humanity will rise for none other than the universal lordship of Allah. That will be the day of judgment.
The greatest proof of establishing Yawm al-Din is the practical formation of a universal system of lordship. My dear ones, here the Quran has declared this for the community. In the next verse, the same theme continues, unfolding in a most beautiful manner. In this context, you can see how link after link connects seamlessly, and there you will realize that what today appears in the form of insurance, the Quran had already 1400 years ago given a profound indication and forewarning about it in a most graceful way. We will take this up in the next lesson. Today we have reached up to verse 265 of Surah Al-Baqarah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم.